Thank you so much for joining us for Next Up. Wendy and I are going to talk to our next guest. He's Les Sterman, who for about 30 years was in charge of the East-West Gateway Council of Governments in downtown St. Louis, but now has put on another hat. He's the chairman of the Citizens for a Greater Downtown St. Louis. And of course, Les, first of all, thank you very much for joining us on the program.
My pleasure.
On the first half, we were talking about the tragic auto accident that resulted in the loss of legs for one young visitor from Tennessee. And of course, leaders are outraged about that. Your organization tweeted the following, and that is, "This is so typical of many of our business and civic organizations in St. Louis. Figure out where the parade is heading and then jump in front of it. Where have they been the last few years as we've been begging them to address this problem more seriously?" And are you talking about crime in downtown St. Louis?
General crime, insecurity, disorder, it's disruptive activities all around. I mean, we have been, our group formed a few years ago in response to some of what we saw was deteriorating conditions downtown. I've lived downtown for over 17 years now, and this is probably the worst it's ever been. And this started well before the pandemic. Some people attribute it solely to the pandemic, but it really started before that.
When?
It's probably the last 5 years we've seen conditions deteriorate. The pandemic accelerated things, and we didn't really recover after the pandemic. Downtown hasn't recovered, and many of the conditions that we saw, the street racing, the gunfire, the traffic lawlessness still continues.
So the other night when there was that tragic auto accident about 100 yards away from your home in downtown St. Louis, what happened 100 yards to the other side?
It was the time is uncertain, but probably a half hour after that, there was a shooting involving 4 victims at a bar that's on the other side, on the side window of my condo. So, yeah, I mean, you take events like that, and you really wonder, what we're still doing here.
Now, your family was in from out of town. Did they say, "Hey, Dad, you got to move out of here"?
They do. My son and daughter and grandchildren say, you got to move someplace where people aren't shooting each other. So that, that's a concern. Downtown is still a great place to live. We enjoy it there. We walk to all the sporting events. We'll walk to the new soccer stadium, of course. There's still some restaurants that we enjoy. We walk to the Arch just about every day when we can. So it's a great place to live. We just have to get control of some of these problems that are affecting us.
And it used to be, I think, that people felt heard when they would make a request of City Hall, when they would go to the paper or go to members of the media with this concern or that concern. Share with our viewers what you have come up against as you have been spearheading this effort.
We have appealed to civic leaders. We spent a lot of our time trying to deal with the Community Improvement District, which is an organization that we all as property owners pay into downtown, and try to help them change what they do to try to address the problems that we were seeing as residents, businesses, and property owners. That was ultimately unsuccessful. We tried to stop them from getting reauthorized, and that's a much longer story, but we ultimately were almost successful at that, but didn't quite make it. We've drafted ordinances to deal with things like problems on surface parking lots. Surface parking lots that are insecure, just wide open, are a source of disruption. And so we drafted an ordinance that was supported by our aldermen to provide fencing and gates on all surface parking lots downtown. Some of the larger parking lot owners opposed it. They had allies on the Board of Aldermen. Even the Cardinals opposed it. And so we were ultimately not heard on that either. We tried to provide an ordinance to control short-term rentals. parties and Airbnb type units downtown are a major source of problems, gunfire and other activities. There have been killings associated with some of those units. So far, we haven't even been able to get a bill introduced in the Board of Aldermen, which is, one reason so many of the issues are now being blamed on the circuit attorney, and I think the circuit attorney deserves all the scorn that's been heaped upon her, but this is a shared problem. The mayor's responsible, the Board of Aldermen is responsible, our civic organizations, Greater St. Louis and others that have either ignored or opposed common sense steps to deal with safety downtown. They're all complicit in this, and we can't just deflect everything onto the circuit attorney.
Have you actually spoken to the mayor, Mayor Jones, or her predecessor, Mayor Cruson?
Yes, I mean they've been at meetings. We've questioned them. When Mayor Jones was running for mayor, she met with the Downtown Neighborhood Association, and we had a good conversation. She said just downtown was just another neighborhood that needs attention, and certainly these problems exist in all neighborhoods throughout the city of St. Louis. Downtown has particular importance because it generates so much tax revenue. It's the symbol of the region. All of our sports teams are there and entertainment venues, so it's really important to have a good image, a good reputation for our downtown.
But it's not enhanced by this week, and in fact, there was one tweet by a former reporter for, I think, Channel 4, Jenna Ray, and she said she's now in Milwaukee. She just left town within the last year to take a job as a reporter in Milwaukee, and she said, when I was working in downtown St. Louis, I was constantly looking over my shoulder to see if there was trouble, and I would hear gunfire, and I would duck behind automobiles. That's what she's sharing about her experience in downtown St. Louis.
Yeah, and Jenna was a great reporter. She lived downtown. We worked with her a lot to try to address some of the issues through media reporting. But, we don't want to exaggerate the issues either. I mean, the issues mainly occur at night, not completely, but mainly occur late at night. We just don't walk the streets at night, which is a shame. I mean,
you do not walk the streets?
Do not.
And would you encourage other people not to?
Well, I spent part of my life living in Manhattan, and you just have to be aware of your surroundings, and you don't walk in places where you're isolated. I mean, if you go into a ball game, that's probably fine. You're with crowds. You don't park too far. But you just have to follow the news, and it's concerning. I mean, it used to be when we first moved down there that there were some incidents, typically involving very late at night, 2 o'clock in the morning, usually involving drugs, people that knew each other. It wasn't a question of innocent bystanders, but now we're finding innocent bystanders like Janae Edmondson are being affected by this. One of the victims of the shooting was somebody that was just walking by on the sidewalk at the time.
When Charlie and I were first working downtown as young adults in the 80s, it was a constant hustle, bustle. You felt safe everywhere. People today would not believe how vibrant downtown St. Louis was back during that era. And I guess I'm afraid because people do tend to minimize. They say, oh, I feel safe at the sporting events, or I feel safe at a concert, or I feel safe in this particular, it seems to be a black or white proposition that, I feel like we're firmly in the gray, but leaning a little bit to more of a dangerous level of actual criminal activity, but we keep trying to minimize it. Is that part of the problem, in your opinion?
Yeah, I think there's always an attempt, particularly by business and civic groups who are trying to promote St. Louis to minimize the issues, or for the Cardinals or the Blues and others that are trying to attract people downtown. And I think that's a problem. I mean, you know, when I was at East West Gateway, I always used to tell people that, you know, we're like a corporation. There's marketing and there's research and development, but you've got to have a great product if your marketing is going to succeed. And so I think we need to have more focus on improving our product.
Well, let me ask you this about the traffic, because in my final year, I worked in downtown St. Louis for about 34 years, and then the final year I noticed, along with other colleagues, that people were just wantonly running red lights, not even thinking about hesitating or slowing down. It was actually quite scary. How many patrol cars are there in downtown St. Louis? Because I didn't see any in my final years. I really did not.
We had a meeting with the police captain downtown last night. Great guy, honest, straight with us. He told us there's one traffic enforcement officer for the 4th District, which takes in downtown as well as large areas of North St. Louis. The other thing that people don't realize, you know, when they talk about St. Louis being over-policed, for example, you know, there's a lot of political chatter about that. The police spend almost all their time responding to 911 calls. There are very few police that are out on patrol. You know, the old beat cop and what we see on the TV shows.
Community policing.
Right.
There's very little actual patrolling done now. They're all responding to 911 calls. I think the captain called it chasing the radio.
We were having the discussion on our first show tonight about whether or not the incident over the weekend was it a traffic issue or was it a criminal issue? I don't think to the family of Janelle Edmondson they're too concerned about that definition. But is the traffic, I mean, as you just outlined, is the traffic such an issue that it is actually affecting crime? I mean, it used to be just, oh yeah, traffic, the rolling Missouri stop. Now it's criminal traffic offenses.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think all of it contributes to a general atmosphere of lawlessness. When there is no enforcement of any kind, even to small offenses, it just leads to the kinds of things that we're seeing. Yeah, you can stand on any street corner in downtown St. Louis and people are sailing through red lights. You can walk around and see car parts on the side of the road from all the accidents that have happened. You know, this is not the first really high-profile incident. There have been others. A couple of years ago, a young woman was killed when the pickup truck she was riding in was hit by a speeding Dodge Charger. You know, there are a lot of tragedies in downtown and throughout the city just because people know that there is no enforcement.
I think also, don't get me started on the litter, because when you go down the 11th Street exit from 6440, it's strewn with litter. And the same is true when you get off the Stan Musial Bridge going down Tucker. And I understand Explore St. Louis is planning a litter cleanup, and I applaud that. They're going to try and take that on. But one problem I think that also has to be addressed is the 911. Because my wife, until her retirement last year, worked in downtown St. Louis on Washington Avenue, and one Saturday afternoon, she saw an assault behind her building. She called 911, was put on hold for 30 minutes, never talked to anybody. And so I wonder how much more crime there is than what's actually reported, because people can't get through to the emergency call to police.
I think that's absolutely right. I don't trust the crime statistics. I mean, you hear one story after another, people calling 911 and giving up. So yeah, I think there's a tremendous amount of unreported crime.
How have the politics of the city, the changing politics of the city, how has that sort of fed into what we're seeing now? And I'm talking about from the mayor's office to the circuit attorney's office and the police department, every stop in between, because it does seem to be the sort of the reoccurring theme.
Yeah, you know, and I'm not sure I would call it even politics. It's ideology more than anything else. And look, I'm an engineer by background, and I consider myself politically progressive, but I'm also driven by facts, and I think that's where we have the problem. And we can talk about defunding the police or over-policing, but, you know, show me how. When police are spending their entire time responding to calls for service, these are people asking for police, and there's no other cops out there who are on patrol. How is that over-policing? I mean, that's just not responding to facts, and I think that's how we need to be driven rather than by ideology. You know, that's what kind of bothers me the most about a lot of the so-called progressives in the city of St. Louis. I mean, most of us have been, some of us have been progressive for our entire lives, politically progressive, and still continue to be. But you can't, you know, you can't be blinded to the facts that are right out in front of you.
Well, if a City of St. Louis police officer, after 20 years on the job, can make $66,000, but the same person can start in Clayton at $68,000 first year, does that mean we're never going to get enough police officers in St. Louis to safely patrol the streets?
Yeah, I mean, it could. I think there are a lot of factors, some of which is salary. You know, and being a cop is kind of a thankless job these days besides. So, you know, it's, I think that contributes to the difficulty to recruit police, particularly in a place like the city of St. Louis, which is, you know, it's not only thankless in terms of the, you know, political hierarchy, but also dangerous. So I think that contributes to it.
Now, I know you've got a 5-point plan that civic leaders and politicians don't want to listen to, but I think our viewers are ready for it. Would you share some of the ideas that you have that you actually started like 5 years ago, your proposals for a safer, better downtown St. Louis?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of an accumulation of proposals that have been made. The 5-point plan was really put out by a group of downtown folks called the, you know, Downtown Economic Development Council, you know, headed by a guy by the name of Jerry Schlichter, who's a great booster of the city. And it's a plan that we support. You know, it involves dealing with things like problem properties, which are the kinds of places where disorderly activity begins.
Is it called broken glass or something like that?
Broken windows.
Broken windows, yeah.
Yeah, that's part of it. But, you know, places like the Shell station that's on Tucker, where we've had, you know, hundreds of police calls for service coming out of there. Dealing with traffic enforcement, dealing with liquor licenses. Often we're giving liquor licenses to people that shouldn't have them, and we end up with situations like the Rain nightclub that got so much exposure. You know, we spent 2 years to get them closed down, you know, after one incident after another. Obviously dealing with homeless is an issue. So, you know, we've outlined a whole variety of steps that can be taken in each of those areas to not just do more enforcement, but actually reduce the sources of crime. You know, unfortunately, I think the civic community in particular thinks the answer is always just more cops, or in their case, more private security. We don't think private security is effective at all, and we've got to give the cops some help. I mean, we can't be putting them in a situation and just creating more work and more danger for them. You know, some of these businesses can't be there, and in what is essentially downtown now is a residential community.
You know, Les, you talked about the problem properties court, but I'm old enough to remember the mid-1990s. We had one in downtown St. Louis. It was headed up by Deborah Carnahan, whose husband, I believe, was Russ Carnahan, if I have that family
right.
correct. Judge Carnahan would find the property owners whose properties were derelict or had weeds that were too high, too much litter strewn about, broken windows. I don't know what happened to that, but that was probably early 2000s, I'm guessing.
Yeah, I mean, there is a problem properties processed now. It's very long, very involved, and typically, you know, if you're citizens, you got to hire attorneys and pursue that process over a long period of time. And you know, I always object to government asking citizens to enforce the law. I mean, that's the government's job, is to protect the public interest, not individual citizens having to bring lawsuits and, you know, spend a lot of money to deal with something like the Shell station. I mean, you know, people have raised money to deal with that particular issue, for example, you know, and, you know, that's an ongoing problem.
Ballpark Village has been such an important, I mean, do you talk about revenue generating for downtown St. Louis? I don't know where we would be without it, but there are those who say that the development of that one particular area has, in a sense, depleted the attention that has been paid to other areas of downtown St. Louis. Nobody's complaining about Ballpark Village, but do you think is there any truth or logic there, Les?
Yeah, I'm one of those people that kind of agrees with that thesis. You know, when I was at East-West Gateway, we put, I think, $11 million into the refurbishing of Washington Avenue. And, you know, and then I think the civic community and the city put another $5 million, huge investment. And, you know, at that time, Washington Avenue, this was like early 2000s, was thriving. When Ballpark Village Phase 2 opened, overnight, Washington Avenue changed.
Yep.
And you know, Ballpark Village got public subsidy to do that. I mean, part of my complaint about what's gone on downtown is there is no plan. We do one thing and then we do another thing, and they compete with each other. And you know, you got small businesses on Washington Avenue having to compete with subsidized businesses in Ballpark Village. You know, we all love the Cardinals, and Ballpark Village is terrific. I spend time there. But we have to think about what we do. I'm a planner. That's what I spent most of my career doing, and we haven't planned for any of this in downtown. The other thing is that, you know, Ballpark Village and Busch Stadium and Union Station and now the soccer stadium, they're islands. And the owners of those properties are going to do what's necessary to protect their islands. They got a lot of money and they got a lot of influence in the community. But, you know, we will all suffer, and ultimately they will suffer if we don't deal with the rest of these problems downtown.
Well, maybe this past weekend, as tragic as it is, will be a turning point. On the other hand, there have been other times in our recent history when I thought, okay, that's the final straw and things are going to change. When a Cardinal fan was shot on the Arch grounds, or when there were photos of kids dancing on the top of a police cruiser, or when a sheriff's deputy was robbed of his firearm in downtown St. Louis. I thought, okay, these are all, things are going to change now. So I'm just not so sure, Les, if things are going to change after this past weekend.
I agree. I mean, and that's, you know, that's why I and members of my, we're truly angry and frustrated now. I think we've tried to work with people. We've tried to be supportive of our civic institutions and our city government. But, you know, I think this may be the straw that broke the camel's back, you know, at least as far as people like us are concerned. We're either going to get things changed or we're going to have to leave. It's as simple as that. I mean, that's a conversation my wife and I have every day. I mean, we've been living down there for 17 years, but, you know, at what point, when you have mayhem on all sides of your apartment, are you going to say, just that's enough?
Are you going to be able to get the money out of your house if you sell it?
In a word, no. No, we bought in 2005, and yeah, I don't think we can get what we paid for it in 2005. And there isn't almost any other neighborhood in the region where you could say that.
It's really unfortunate, though, because with the soccer team, the new soccer stadium, as you mentioned, there is a great deal of excitement. You know, people want to get excited about those islands that you would think would draw residents back down to the city. So timing is of the essence, and we don't have any more time to lose, as Charlie is saying, and you obviously agree.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. you know, I've listened over the years how, you know, the Dome Stadium was going to change everything
Sure.
downtown, then the new Busch Stadium was going to change, and then the Enterprise Center, and on and on and on. These investments are important, and we're grateful for them, and we're grateful to the people who spend the money on them. But, you know, you got to pay attention to the little things, the quality of life things that make it worthwhile to live and work downtown. And we just haven't done a good job at that.
Well, there's a book called The Death and Life of Great American Cities by
There is.
Jane Jacobs. And she says, you know, it's not a convention center or a stadium that makes it downtown. It's the bakery, it's the dry cleaners, it's the little boutique that people on the sidewalk can walk by. But I don't think, Les, there's a single person in St. Louis who's read that book. and you know,
Well, you and I have, so, but, you know.
you know, maybe we should form a book club and
Or walked by that boutique, for that matter. I mean, there are no boutiques down there.
fewer and fewer, you're right.
Fewer and fewer.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the Greater St. Louis and others have put together a plan called Design Downtown that talks about activating the street and things of that nature. That's very positive. I just don't see anybody implementing it at this point.
Well, I think Wendy and I both agree that you and the other pioneers in downtown St. Louis deserve our support. You,
Without question.
you put the investment down there, and you're the welcome mat for the region. When people visit St. Louis, they visit downtown primarily, and they form opinions on the entire region based on what they see downtown. So thank you for the hard work. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, my pleasure.
Thank you, Les.
Anytime.
And thank you very much. We'll be back next week.
Donnybrook is made possible by the support of the Betsy and Thomas Patterson Foundation and the members of 9PBS.